I'm just here to deliver your daily black pill. Because, I mean, to be honest, this is something we knew. This is something that we all knew. It's just that article that I find quite interesting. Global freedom is on the decline, and it's because governments around the world are becoming a lot more authoritarian, especially now that they have a pandemic to use as an excuse for it. A new report says that 83% of the world's population is less free today than it was in 2008, and the gap between the world's most and least free countries is growing. Probably talking about the West, although the West is starting to get very, very, very bad. The vast majority of the world's population is less free today than it was about a decade ago, and all residents of the world's 10 most populated countries have seen their freedoms decline over the same period. That is the most worrying takeaway from the annual Human Freedom Index. You should all see the Human Freedom Index and also the Press Freedom Index and stuff like that, or there's also the Index on Freedom, who are a different advocacy group. You should read all of that. It's very important to keep track of the way the world's going. In an annual report produced by the Libertarian Cato Institute and the Fraser Institute, a Canadian think tank, sorry. This year's index, released on Thursday, ranks the United States as the world's 15th most free country out of the 156 jurisdictions included in the analysis. Now, a lot of people would think that America is the most free country in the world. Its prison population says otherwise. But anyway, the top 5 freest countries are Switzerland, which is actually a very based country, by the way. Switzerland isn't even really left or right wing. It is this weird amalgamation of all of them, but Switzerland actually do very well. New Zealand, I am calling bullshit on New Zealand. I am calling complete bullshit on New Zealand because we all know what has been going on there recently. Denmark, Estonia, and Ireland. Egypt, Sudan, Yemen, Venezuela, and Syria are at the bottom of the rankings because, well, yeah. Which take into account 82 indicators of economic, personal, and civil freedoms. Somewhere has to be considered the freest place in the world, but the global trends are moving in the wrong direction. Since the first report was published in 2008, the author of this year's version notes that about 83% of the world's population has seen freedom decline. The gap between the most and least free has also widened, with some 40% of the world's people now residing in countries that rank in the bottom 20% for overall freedom. But one thing that will definitely be, how the one that gets put in there that completely swings where the average is, it'll be China. Bear in mind, like 1 out of every 8 people in the world. In fact, I think it's higher than that. I think it's 1 out of every 7. Over 1 out of every 7 people in the world are in China. So that means like a whole seventh of the world are living in a totalitarian regime. That's a seventh of the planet. Although I think if you took in other places, like there's places like Uzbekistan, which is really bad, by the way. They've got is it Uzbekistan or is it Kyrgyzstan? I think it's Kyrgyzstan. Basically, one of the stands, but they've got pretty much the same thing as North Korea, where every house has a picture of the dear leader. Say anything about the dear leader, and they knock your door at 4 in the morning, and that's the last anyone ever hears from you. Yeah, yeah, there's a country like that. So there's places like Saudi Arabia, other loads of other places as well. So basically, for me, far too many people in the world live under authoritarian regimes, and obviously the West is getting a lot worse because, well, democratic republicanism. That's where it leads. The decline in fundamental rights represents a disturbing trend that was occurring even before the world experienced the COVID-19 pandemic, which obviously I believe hit the fast forward button a little, and its social and political effects, writes Ian Vasquez, Vice President of International Studies at Cato. The ideas that saw the largest falls globally were freedom of expression, freedom of religion, and freedom of association, assembly, and civil society. Although our report does not yet pick up freedom data from 2020, we fully expect to see a deterioration in global freedom indicators in future reports. And I think, obviously, once the year where all the COVID restrictions came in, you're going to see the freedom index just go like pew, like right down. Freedom in the United States is on the decline in both absolute and relative terms, according to the new report. In 2008, the US ranked 7th in the world, but has steadily slipped lower, though it still ranks well ahead of the global average, which is, yeah, unfortunately, America is free, but for how much longer? But the decline in the freedom in the United States is nothing compared to what has happened in Hungary, a country now routinely and wrongly held up by segments of the nationalist right as an example that America should seek to emulate. Hungary ranks 59th in this year's index, down from a high of 29th in 2009. Recent efforts by strongman dictator Viktor Orban to curtail freedom of expression and erode the rule of law are clearly reflected in the ratings, with Hungary now ranking considerably less free than its European neighbours. And that's the problem when you advocate for, being able to control speech and expression. It means that the other side can do it too. And look what's happened in Hungary. But it's a case of, no, it's like, but when you talk to like leftists, like the mental ones, they'll tell you, no, but it's okay when we do it. How about just nobody have that power? How about nobody has the power to litigate and control what other people can and cannot do? How about that? How about that? I think that's the best option. But no, you'll get fucking idiots on either side that will go, no, the government should have more power to advocate for my ideals. I'm sure I'll be fine though, because I'm a good boy. I'm a good dog. Yeah, until you're not. As Reason noted last month, the twin threats of political populism and the COVID-19 pandemic have triggered an erosion in democratic values. Good. Across the globe. International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, a non-profit based in Sweden that has been tracking democracies around the globe since 1975, warns in a new report that the number of countries that are becoming more authoritarian by the group's calculus is 3 times the number of countries that are moving toward democracy. By the way, democracy does not mean freedom. Right? This equation of democracy means freedom? No. Nonsense. Absolute shite. This year is the 5th consecutive year in which the trend has been moving in that direction. Freedom and democracy are not necessarily synonymous. I would argue that democracy is the opposite. And sometimes can be quite in tension. But democratic governments throughout history have done a better job of protecting and promoting freedom than more authoritarian regimes. Yeah, a little bit. A little bit, but the ultimate end state of democracy, I'm just saying, like, loads and loads of democratic republics, like, popped up, like, all over the place after World War One. And are they freer now than they were back then? The answer might surprise you. Now, the two values seem to be declining in tandem. And here we are, it's at the end of the article. Now, obviously, absolutely blackpilling as hell, but it's nothing that we didn't know. It's nothing that we didn't know. Like, governments enjoy power, and it doesn't matter if it's an authoritarian one or a democratic one, they all enjoy power, and at the end of the day, the only thing that they give a fuck about is preserving that power. That's all they care about, and that is all they want. And the problem is, when we have these governments in charge, then yes, freedom will decrease. Freedom will get a lot worse. We will have less and less of it every year the more we allow these people to stay in power. So, obviously, they should be removed from power. Peacefully. In Minecraft.